So what we are going to talk today is, as we have seen yesterday, that we know who are the players in the orchestra of immune response. We have also realized that where does it happen, that the lymph node is one of the major organ, spleen is another organ, and we have multiple different kinds of cells which play a role in generation of an immune response. What we are going to talk today is, how is this coordinated immune response generated? So let's take an example of staph infection, which is a very simple infection. And what you see there is that staphylococcal bacteria has entered your skin. And once these bacteria enter, they produce certain substances which will attract the neutrophils, because it gives a danger kind of a signal. Anything which is foreign in the body makes certain things, and the body realizes that there is some threat. So as we discussed yesterday, that we have these neutrophils which will roll, which will adhere, and which will migrate. Once they migrate, the migration, and they will recognize, because of these substances being produced by these bacteria which attract these neutrophils, and because of local inflammation which is generated by the local cells, these neutrophils will migrate according to the chemotaxis gradient and will reach the site of infection. Once they reach the site of infection, the neutrophils, as we saw yesterday, that they can kill the bacteria by generating reactive oxygen species by using NADPH oxidase system. And we said that if it is deficient, you can get a disease like CJD. Or they can, if this, we already have pre-existing antibodies or antibodies which can recognize the staph aureus, the staph aureus will get coated by these antibodies and will be taken up by these phagocytes either through complement receptors, because as we know, antibodies can bind complement, and then this can bind to complement receptor, or the antibodies can directly bind to the FC receptors which bind the FC portion of immunoglobulin. I showed you yesterday that the antibody has two components. One is antigen binding site. So the antigen binding site will bind to the staph aureus, and the FC portion will be free. So the FC portion can then bind to the FC receptor. So because of this, these bacteria are taken inside the neutrophils, and there they can be destroyed by either the enzymes which are present in the neutrophils, because these granules will fuse with the lysosomes, and the lysosomes, the endosome fusion will cause killing of this bacteria. The other thing which has come up in the last 10 years is a procedure called netosis. Netosis is a form of neutrophil thing in which once a neutrophil gets activated, and especially when you have reactive oxygen species being formed, there will be the release of the DNA material. So the DNA comes out of the neutrophil cell membrane, and along with that, as we know, the DNA is always in association with histones, and it also contains certain enzymes like myeloperoxidase, cathepsin, plus it contains antimicrobial peptides. So these will trap the bacteria. Because of this meshwork, the bacteria which are present in the vicinity of this neutrophil will get trapped inside, and because it contains antibacterial compounds, those antibacterial compounds can kill the bacteria. So in some cases, once you have netosis, the neutrophil dies. While in other situations, the cell membrane can get sealed off and the neutrophil can still keep functioning. So these are the three mechanisms by which neutrophils take care of the extracellular bacteria. They can kill them.
This DNA protrusion is very fascinating phenomenon. What could be the reason why the DNA itself has to come out? So the rest of the
So this is a phenomenon which happens because there is citronylation of the histones, and this citronated histones, and there is a nuclear decondensation. So this is a one form of death, as we have apoptosis. Please, I will request everybody to switch off their mics because there's a lot of noise coming. Yes, please switch off your mics. Yes. So once you have this, whenever the neutrophil gets activated, when you get reactive oxygen species, there there is citrullation. There is conversion from arginine to citrulline in the histone. Histone is a protein. So once there is a citrullated histone, the DNA opens up. The opening up of DNA also causes certain changes, which causes decondensation, and these enzymes, myeloperoxidase and all, will cause the cell membrane to rupture. But it is a very controlled rupture, and that will cause release of certain amount of DNA plus these enzymes plus antibacterial products. And it is thought that this is happening because this is a very efficient mechanism to clear the bacteria which are present in the vicinity, and plus the neutrophil can still be saved, because otherwise we know that in neutrophils, once it comes out, it can never go back. It has to die. It just reaches its graveyard and it dies. But in some form of netosis, the neutrophil can survive and look after more bacterial threats. So,
Excuse
as
me,
we know
ma'am.
that, yes.
Ma'am, I have a doubt. Causing this netosis, wouldn't these intracellular materials serve as a target for autoantigens and play a role
Yes,
in
yes. So that's
apart
why if you
from
see the bottom panel of this, which I have not discussed, this is also one of the mechanisms by which autoantigens get exposed outside. And this is a mechanism postulated in ANCA-associated vasculitis, that myeloperoxidase can get exposed. And if you have already antibodies present to that, they can cause autoimmune
vasculitis?
phenomena. Yeah, and plus
Okay,
it can
thank
also sensitize the T cells to self antigens. So in immune system, there is always a balance between two things. Like, it is beneficial and it can also be harmful. You just have to strike a
Yes,
balance, and regulation has to happen. Okay,
thank you,
please
ma'am.
put off your mics again. All of you have to put off your mics. Yes. So the other thing, whenever you have overwhelming infection, we get sepsis. And this term has now gone out of vogue. Basically, it is a systemic inflammatory response. So what happens in this systemic inflammatory response? You have bacteria. So the major pathogenic factors are how much is the load of the bacteria, how much the virulence, what kind of molecular patterns they have on the cell surface. We all know that gram-negative bacteria cause more sepsis than gram-positive bacteria. So these will bind to the TLRs. Once they bind to the TLRs, we know that once the TLRs are bound, either the endosomal TLRs or the surface TLRs, they cause release of multiple cytokines. TNF, interferons, all these activate the neutrophils, which give rise to reactive oxygen species, proteases, and we showed you yesterday that there is complement activation. There is also a coagulation cascade which sets into motion. Plus, you get cell death. The neutrophils can die by necrosis, neutrophils can die by necroptosis, neutrophils can die by your netosis. All this leads on to perpetuation of inflammation. The body is trying to regulate that. And the regulation occurs by three major mechanisms. One, that there is increased parasympathetic drive from the brain. The parasympathetic system, acetylcholine, inhibits the pro-inflammatory cytokine production. Then adrenal gland, it produces cortisol. Once you have cortisol, that what does cortisol do? Cortisol will inhibit pro-inflammatory cytokines. Second, all these cells, when there is death happening, there is death of other cells also happen. There is apoptosis of T cell, B cell, dendritic cells. So when this happens, there is impairment of function of other immune cells, which will cause basically a type of immune senescence. People have shown that patients who develop this systemic inflammatory response have actually a phenomenon of immune senescence. Their regulation is defective. They have expansion of regulatory T cells or suppressor cells. Because they get much more of these regulatory T cell and myeloid suppressor cells, they are not able to control the infection. Plus, you have anti-inflammatory cytokines, soluble cytokine receptors, these get upregulated. So this is, normally we should have a good control of, we should inhibit the pro-inflammatory gene transcription, but it is not happening. It should happen. In a control situation, the inflammation which is happening should be controlled by good release of cortisol. You should have adequate release of cortisol. If you have less release of cortisol, your inflammation doesn't get controlled. If you have poor anti-inflammatory cytokine being produced, which are much less than what the inflammation is happening, the inflammation will keep on persisting. So people have shown that patients who get this systemic inflammatory response, their regulation of the inflammation is defective, which should normally happen by the neuroendocrine system, which should happen by increase in the transcription of anti-inflammatory cytokine, inhibition of pro-inflammatory gene transcription, all that should happen. And because these patients get a phenomena of immune senescence, we know that patients who recover from one infection are much more prone to get another infection. Like in ICU setting, patient recovers from one infection, gets another infection because he is in a state of immune paralysis. So this is what you see when you have overwhelming bacterial infections. Let's see, this is what is taken care of by our innate immune system, where we don't have lymphocytes coming into use much. But generally, if the innate immune system is not able to take care of the infection, we gradually get development of adaptive immune response, which will take about a few days to develop. So if you see here, this is the epithelium and the microbe has entered. It is taken up by your dendritic cell or a macrophage. That will go into the lymphatic tissue, or the lymphatics will drain this area and will go into the lymph node. If it is an antigen which has entered the blood, it will go into the spleen. This we have learned yesterday. And to take these antigen presenting cells which are loaded with bacteria from the periphery to the lymph node, we have these channels which are the lymphatic channels. And we also have the antigen presenting cells. Yesterday we did not discuss that what are the characteristics of professional antigen presenting cell. We also have atypical antigen presenting cells. But the two major antigen presenting cells are dendritic cells and macrophages, and also B cells. I don't think most of you know that B cells, even one, they help in production of antibodies, but they also help in presentation of antigen. The cells which need to present antigen the first prerequisite is that they should be able to take up the antigen. They should be able to internalize the antigen. So the phagocytes internalize the antigen by phagocytosis, while the B cell doesn't have a capability to phagocytose. So it internalizes the antigen by binding to the B cell receptor. Then we need to have some other receptors to activate these cells. So third is that all antigens are presented to T cell in conjunction with MHC class II. So a professional antigen presenting cell must have MHC class II expression on its surface. While if you look at these atypical antigen presenting cells, these are only some of the examples, even like epithelial cells, keratinocyte, synoviocytes, they can become like antigen presenting cell once they start expressing MHC class II molecule on its surface. So those cells normally do not express, but in abnormal situations, they can express class II molecule and become antigen presenting cells. So the thing, what is needed for good antigen presentation is that we should have a great capacity to take antigen, and the cell should have a capacity to process the antigen. We'll see why we need to process the antigen. So if you look at immature dendritic cells, they have a very high capacity to take up the antigen. That is what we want in the initial phase. Then we want that it should be able to process. But for presentation, that is to put it on a plate in a proper way, it's like a cooking. I mean, immature DC is like a chef, which will prepare the antigen in such a way that it can be now presented to the guest. The guest is a T cell. So it has to be made in a form which the T cell would find interesting and would mount an immune response to it. So that is the process which we call as antigen presentation. And antigen presentation is a very, very important process in linking the innate immune system to the adaptive immune system. And it is during this process of movement of cells that this maturation occurs. If you will see in this next cartoon, that antigen has been captured in the skin. So this is in the skin, the antigen presenting cell is called the Langerhans cells. So the Langerhans cells has captured this bacteria and it has produced some pro-inflammatory cytokines. So once it produces the pro-inflammatory cytokines, what happens is that the receptors on it change. And once those change, it loses its capacity to stay inside the skin. When the homing receptors are down modulated, and now it can move into the lymphatics. So then it migrates into the lymphatics, and during this migration process, what happens is that this antigen presenting cell or the dendritic cell matures. Maturation means it starts expressing more of class 2 antigen and it starts expressing more of co-stimulatory molecules, while the capacity to take up antigen or to phagocytose goes down because that process has already happened. And then it reaches the lymph node. And we saw yesterday that lymph node has afferent lymphatics. And through these afferent lymphatics, these professional antigen presenting cells bring the bacteria to the medullary area of the lymph node. And this is where it will meet the T cell. So as I said, just to recapitulate, that a mature dendritic cell has high amount of co-stimulatory molecules. It has a high expression of class 2 expression. It produces a lot more of pro-inflammatory cytokines. It has a lower phagocytic capacity. It has a high CCR7 expression. This CCR7 expression is needed for it to stay inside the lymph node, because this is a receptor which is needed for homing inside the lymph node. And plus, it is metabolically more active. Obviously, if it is producing so many things, it needs to use glucose to produce that. So that is why it has a high glycolytic activity in contrast to an immature dendritic cell. So this is the dendritic cell now has to see that the MHC class 1 is different, because the T cell, the cytotoxic T cell, will see the antigen in context with MHC class 1, while the T cell, helper T cell, will see the antigen in context with MHC class 2. For generation of any effective immune response, we need to have a CD4 helper cell response, because that is the most crucial part of start of a good immune response. So before we go how this whole thing happens, we must know what an MHC molecule looks like. So the MHC molecules these are called major histocomparative complex, because they were described in context of transplantation. That when people were transplanting a small part of skin from one mouse to another, it used to get rejected. So whichever it used to get accepted, it used to be called histocompatibility, that is tissue compatibility. So these molecules are called major histocompatibility complex molecules. So you have class 1 molecule and you have class 2 MHC. It can also be called HLA class 1 and HLA class 2. So the class 1 MHC molecule actually has one chain, that is a heavy chain, which is got 3 parts, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. It does not have the second chain. The second chain is formed by a ubiquitous protein which is called the beta 2 microglobulin, and this is important to give it stability, to give it a structure. While in class 2 MHC, you have 2 chains, that is one alpha chain and a beta chain, which are coded by different genes, and they come together to form a stable MHC molecule. So the MHC, as you all know, is co-dominant. That generally in genes we have only one chromosome gets expressed, but for MHC both the chromosome proteins are expressed. So we get DR genes, DQ, DP, HLA-A, B, C. So these are the conventional ones. So we have, all of us will have 2 copies of DR, one from the mother, one from the father. So that is why it is called co-dominant expression. So why is it there? It is there because this gives us an advantage. Because if I have different, suppose I have 12 different HLA molecules, 2 DR, 2 DP, 2 DQ, and HLA A, B, C, 6 types. So I have more chance that I can present different forms of peptides or antigens to the T cell. If I had only half of it, the capacity would have been less. So this basically increases the number of different molecules that can present peptide to T cell. And then the second thing is that HLA genes are the most polymorphic genes in the population. They exist in different forms, so which we call as alleles. And that ensures, and that can also partly explain why infections which happen in the community, some people get it, some don't get it. So in some, if the antigen is presented in a very nice way, may mount a very good effective immune response so that they don't even develop a disease. While others are not able to mount a robust immune response and they get the disease. So people have tried to associate HLAs with different outcomes in infectious disease. And so are what they are trying also in SARS-CoV-2 infection, even though we don't have very substantial data as yet. And as I showed you earlier, that class 2 expression occurs predominantly on the classical or the professional antigen presenting cells. That is the dendritic cell, the macrophage, the B cell. While class 1 HLA expression occurs on all the cells. Can somebody tell us why does class 1 expression occur on all cells? What do you think could be a reason? Anybody?
Probably that's the identity of the person, the identity thing that the body wanted to decide.
Identity of what? We have three different, we have A, B, C. It's not self-identity. It's not self-identity. Anybody else wants to take up that question?
Ma'am, to prevent autoimmunity.
To prevent autoimmunity. Okay. What else? Does it really prevent autoimmunity? Who knows?
Like ma'am, this is continuously processing the peptides and process MHC1 is showing expressing it on its surface, so the body realizes like what not to mount an immune response against.
Okay, so that we will discuss in the talk tomorrow. How is tolerance generated to your self proteins?
Yeah,
this is not the mechanism. This is not the mechanism. Anybody else? Anybody else? Just have a thought. We are still talking of infections.
All cells can present microbial peptides, like most of the cells.
So, because any infection can infect any cell.
Cells.
So every cell should have a capacity to present the bacterial peptide on its surface so that it can be attacked by your CD8 positive cytotoxic cells. So that is why all nucleated cells have MHC class 1 expression, because viral infection can occur in any cell. Otherwise, how will it get destroyed? So that is the reason
and in
why
that case, even RBC should also have MHC, right? But they don't.
So the
like,
RBC infections are very rare. The RBCs rarely get infected, you see, because they have lot of movement and they are passing through the spleen very, very fast. And the spleen has a mechanism of removing all the RBCs which are terrible looking, which have something else. So the RBC removal is all happening in the spleen. So for RBCs, God has made a very different mechanism. But for other cells which can't move, I mean, can your liver cells move anywhere? No.
No.
So for them, you have to have a different mechanism. And 99% of our cells can't move.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's move forward. So I hope you have understood what an MHC class 1 molecule is, what a class 2 is. I'm just showing a very simple cartoon of this chromosome 6, where how these MHC genes are arranged, not for any remembering anything. So the MHC class 1, the most important are A, B, C. And the MHC class 2, we have DP, DQ, and DR. The DR is the most important, it is the most polymorphic. And you are seeing two more things here, LMP and TAP. So the significance of these will be clear to you in the next few slides. But it is so interesting to see that all the genes which are needed for antigen presentation are all located in the same area. Even though LMP and TAP are not part of the MHC, but because they are needed for antigen presentation, they are all in the same area. We'll see what this LMP gene does and what the TAP gene does. So if you look at this diagram, you will see that the MHC class 1 and class 2 are all transmembrane proteins which are expressed on the cell surface. And if you look from the top of this is a ribbon diagram which shows you that this is MHC class 2. So this is alpha chain, this is beta chain, and it forms a pocket-like thing. So this is the groove where the antigenic peptide binds. So it's a very nicely made groove. And depending on what different types of HLA you have, like I may have HLA DR5. So my DR5 may have certain amino acids here and certain amino acids here. So a different peptide may bind here because it's all interactions in protein-protein interactions are all charge-based interactions. So if somebody else, so I might do a good response to some peptide while other person may have a good response to other peptide because it has a best binding fit. So this antigen presenting cell now has the MHC as we saw. It has class 2 MHC because it needs to interact with the helper cell, the CD4 cells. So this interaction, as I told you earlier, is the most crucial interaction in development of our adaptive immune system. And this we discussed yesterday, that depending on the milieu, depending on what the threat is, there will be polarization of this naive T cell into different kinds of T cell. But the T cell cannot see the bacteria as toto, while the neutrophil can engulf the whole bacteria, no issues. Macrophage can engulf the whole bacteria. The T cell cannot see the whole bacteria. As I told you that it needs the bacteria to be processed, made into a nice dish, and then only it can see it. So this is a cartoon of what does it see. So if you see T cell, this is the T cell receptor, and this is your MHC class 2 molecule in pink color or orange and pink, and this is what it sees. It sees only a very small component of the bacterial proteins. So this green color. So the antigen presenting cell has to chop up the bacteria in such a way that you get these peptides of about 10 to 11 amino acids, which can be then seen by T cell to generate an immune response. So let's see how the antigen presenting cell does this chopping chop. So we have two kinds of microbes. One which can be phagocytosed. They go into the phagosome and they survive there. These are your all intracellular bacteria, fungi, protozoa. Then you have viruses. Viruses generally uncoat themselves. Like they bind to the membrane receptor. So what is the receptor for SARS-CoV-2? Anybody?
ACE2 receptor.
APP4. ACE2 receptor.
ACE2 itself. ACE2, it's antigen converting enzyme. Okay, 2, ACE2. Okay. Then for HIV?
CD4.
CCR5.
CCR4.
CCR5 is one. What is the other one?
CXCR4. CXCR4.
CXCR4. CXCR4.
CXCR5. So most of the viruses have certain receptor, like EBV binds to the complement receptor 3. So viruses use our own proteins to get inside. So once the intracellular pathogens, when they enter here, either through the phagosome or the virus has come and uncoated itself and gone to the DNA. When if it is a DNA virus, it is in the nucleus, or if it is the RNA virus, the protein synthesis is done inside the host cell. So here, if it is in the phagosome, what happens is the phagosome gets lysed and the protein antigens comes into the cytosol. So either it comes through this mechanism or it comes through this mechanism, that it is synthesized de novo inside the cell in case of a virus. These are big proteins. And as I told you that the T cell cannot see big proteins. T cell can only see about 10 to 11 amino acid long peptides. So how do you chop up this? To chop up these peptides or proteins, we have a complex called proteasome. And I showed you that on the chromosome 6, you had one more gene, which was called what? LMP. So the LMP genes code for the proteins which make the proteasome. So if you see here, so this proteasome in the cytosol will chop up this protein into small peptides. Now these peptides need to be put on the HLA. How these peptides will be put onto the top of the HLA? So HLA is also getting synthesized inside the cell. It's a protein. So it is synthesized on the endoplasmic reticulum. So once it is synthesized, it goes into the, it is there in the endoplasmic reticulum, and then it gets its structure. Because I told you the class 1 has one heavy chain and the beta 2 microglobulin gives it a stability. So it will bind to the beta 2 microglobulin and it will, once it is, so what is this TAP? I showed you that there was another gene in the MHC molecule, which is the TAP gene. Anybody from hematology can tell us what is this TAP and LMP?
Transporter associated with antigen presentation.
Who is this person? You didn't
Akash.
identify yourself. Which one?
Akash. Akash.
Akash. Good.
From
So,
medicine.
yes, I've written general medicine. I have got names of all who are answering questions. So this is a transporter associated, which is a transporter which will put these peptides. It recognizes certain component of the peptide, which is important, which can bind with much better efficiency to class 1 molecule. So it transports only those peptides from the cytosol into the endoplasmic reticulum. And these peptides will now get loaded onto the MHC class 1 molecule. And this whole complex along with this one will get transported and will be expressed on the cell surface. So the same thing can happen in viruses. As I showed you that viruses generally synthesize their protein inside the cell, in the host cell itself, and the proteasome. So you might think that why not our own self proteins, which are, their cytosol is full of all proteins. So why don't all the proteins get degraded? So there is a tag which needs to be put on the protein, then only the protein can enter inside the proteasome. This is to keep that we don't kill our own self protein. We don't chop up our own self protein. It's a very nice, if you think how, it has all been designed so well. So these proteasome proteins make like a barrel. So they have this multiple different types of proteasome protein which form the core particle, and on top you have the regulation that which protein will enter. So only the protein which has ubiquitin on it can enter the proteasome, and all the enzymes which will chop up this protein are inside this barrel. So they cannot cause chopping up of the cytosolic proteins which are outside on the outside of this proteasome. Only chopping can happen only inside the barrel, and only proteins which are ubiquitinated can be taken inside. So that keeps the regulation that other proteins are not chopped up. And once they come out of it, they come out like chopped proteins, which are peptide fragments. And of these also, ones which can bind to the MHC class 1 are preferentially transported by this transporter into the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, somebody had a question.
Ma'am, how it is that only the foreign particles are ubiquitinated? Even the self.
Yes. So you are absolutely right. What's your name?
Hasina from genetics.
Hasina, genetics. So what Hasina, it happens is that it's not that the proteasome only degrades the proteins which need to be, which are foreign. It also degrades protein which are bad, which are misfolded, which are, so you have the immunoproteasome and you have other proteasomes. So the immunoproteasome is generally activated when you have an external threat, while the other proteasome is always there, which takes care of the degraded or poorly folded proteins, or whatever the cell wants to get rid of them, that will get ubiquitinated and will be degraded by the proteasome.
Yes, ma'am. We have a huge set of ubiquitinopathy related neurodegenerative diseases.
Yes.
So
There are many.
All the prion diseases are due to this, right? Abnormal.
Yes. There are many diseases which are linked to poor ubiquitination, poor degradation of ubiquitinated protein, and or their defects in the proteasomes. Like if you see that what we call as where you get multiple joint contractures, That is a defect basically in proteasome. That is a Japanese name. Forgetting the name of that disease. So it's a genetic disorder where you have defect in the proteasome genes. So the all misfolded protein keep accumulating. So this, what we are talking in the context of is the endogenous microbes which are intracellular pathogens, and in context of the tumor antigens, because most of the tumor antigens are all your own self proteins. So they are inside the cytosol. So they are also processed and presented by MHC class 1. May I request you to put off your mics? Thank you. Now what happens for extracellular pathogens? The extracellular pathogens use a very different route. The extracellular pathogens are taken up by the endocytic vesicle. And this endocytic vesicle fuses with the lysosome. So can somebody tell us what is there in the lysosomes?
Hydrolytic enzyme.
So far. This is again Hasina.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What did you say?
No, hydrolytic enzymes.
Yeah, hydrolytic enzyme. Yes. What else?
Glycosidases, proteases.
Hydrolysis.
And plus the lysosome has a acidic pH. That is the most important thing in the lysosome. That as the endosome fuses with the lysosome, the pH keeps changing. It becomes much and much acidic. And you know that acid is a one thing which can destroy the proteins. So what is happening is, so your antigen is coming via this pathway, that is vesicle, endosome formation, and its fusion with lysosome, while your MHC is being synthesized in the endoplasmic reticulum, the alpha and beta chain associate. So the question arises that you have these peptides which have come in through the STAP protein. Why don't they bind to class 2 MHC here itself? While they bind to the MHC class 1, why they don't bind to MHC class 2?
They have a tag which prevents it from binding. I think it is called the invariant chain.
Yes. So this is what happens is that it's made so much like that so that you keep them two pathways separate. To keep the two pathways separate, when the alpha and beta chain associate, their peptide binding groove or the antigen binding groove is kept occupied by something called the invariant chain. And this also gives stability to the MHC class 2 molecule, plus it prevents peptides which are present in the endoplasmic reticulum, which are supposed to be bound by MHC class 1, from binding to MHC class 2. So now we have the MHC. Yes?
Can you please repeat this again?
Sure. So what is happening, like I showed you the previous diagram, let's go back to the previous diagram. So here you saw that the peptides were coming in from the cytosol into the endoplasmic reticulum, and they were binding to the MHC class 1. So we are saying the same place MHC class 2 is also getting synthesized. So why do these peptides not bind to MHC class 2? Why they don't bind is because when the alpha and beta chain come together of MHC class 2, in the same vicinity, we have this invariant chain. The invariant protein binds to the antigen binding site, so that now the peptides which are floating around here cannot bind. Till the invariant chain binds here, this complex is not stable. So the alpha and beta chain stay separate. So even if the peptide comes here, they don't become very tightly bound. So that is how you have the MHC class 2 and you have the extracellular antigen which has been chopped off because of either the enzymes in the lysosome as well as because of acidic pH. Now you see here, so the from the endoplasmic reticulum. Yeah, please switch off your mics. So you see that after the endoplasmic reticulum, any protein which has to go to the surface always go through Golgi. It goes to the Golgi. and then forms the endocytic, this exocytic vesicle, and then it will come to the cell surface. So what happens is that this vesicle, which is containing the MHC class 2 with the invariant chain, now fuses with your lysosome. The lysosome has these peptides, while in MHC class 1, it was happening in the endoplasmic reticulum. Here it is happening in the lysosomal, the exocytic vesicle fusing with the lysosome. So here what happens is that this invariant chain is chopped off because it has all these degradative enzymes, it has acidic pH, it can chop off this and the groove becomes empty, and now it is exchanged with the peptide of your interest. And that's how the MHC class 2 molecule with peptide which has come from the extracellular area reaches the periphery on the cell membrane. So if you see, if you compare these two diagrams, this is a very simple cartoon from Abul Abbas' book, which shows that the extracellular antigen uptake, you have endocytic vesicle, which fuses with the lysosome, and you have this MHC class 2 coming with the invariant chain in it, and now this peptide is exchanged and it comes and will present the antigen to the CD4 cell. While if it is an intracellular pathogen, it will be chopped up by the proteasome, taken inside the ER by the TAP proteins, and loaded onto the MHC class 1 for it to be presented to CD8 cells. So these are two pathways which we call antigen presentation of endogenous antigens or antigen presentation of exogenous antigens. Even though I have shown you that they are two tight compartments, these are not watertight. The cross presentation can occur because we know that in almost every infection, even in viral infections, we get CD4 response, and even in extracellular bacterial infections, we get CD8 response. It is just that in viral infection, the CD8 responses are much more robust, while in extracellular bacterial infections, the CD4 responses are more robust. But both of them develop because what happens is that this endocytic vesicle can rupture and it can cause the antigen to come into the cytosol and behave like a endogenous antigens. Similarly, the MHC class 1 molecule can recycle and come into the endosome and can be bound by the peptides which are coming from the extracellular space. So both can happen, but that happens at a less frequency than what is happening here. So any questions so far on antigen presentation? Then we will see how antigen is recognized on the other side. Anybody has any questions? Okay, so if we don't have any questions, so the antigen recognition has to be done. Yes. Any questions?
There is a question.
Yeah, sure.
There is any difference in antigen presentation in different kind of organs, like in liver, the antigen.
As I told you that the professional antigen presenting cells are the dendritic cells and the B cells. So the dendritic cells predominantly present antigen in the lymph node. They carry the antigen to the lymph node where generally the immune response gets exaggerated and generated. While the cell in the organ, there are very small number of these cells which will present antigen to the CD4 cells. And even for the B cell antigen presentation predominantly occurs in the lymph node. We will see that later. So most of the cytotoxic T cell killing, so the antigen which is presented by MHC class 1 is actually not an antigen presentation. It is actually a recognition, as you will see later. It's basically to recognize that this cell has got virus infection. This is to recognize that this cell has now become cancerous. It is presenting certain antigens, which is of a signal that it is becoming precancerous or cancerous. So actually the MHC class 1 antigen presentation is more for recognition, while the antigen presentation by MHC class 2 is for generation of the adaptive immune response. So we will see just now in the next few slides. So the antigen recognition is...
Yes. Can I ask a quick question? The
sure.
removal of the unwanted proteins or base proteins, is it always only through immune mechanism, or are there non-immune mechanisms also to recognize and wash away waste proteins from any?
There are many mechanisms to remove this misfolded proteins inside the cell or even the organelles. You have autophagy. Autophagy is one which you eat up your own organs. The cell eats up its own organs to at least get back the amino acids to synthesize them again. You have this proteasome complex which will just chop up the protein, and the amino acids can go back in synthesis of again the new proteins. So there are many mechanisms. You have
antigen
yeah.
Right. Okay. So I thought everywhere in some way or other, antigenic or immune mechanisms also are coming in play.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Cell has a lot of mechanism to save its organ, to rebuild its organ. So antigen recognition, like B cell receptor, can directly bind to antigen, because I'll show you that I told you that T cell can only bind to 8 to 10 amino acid peptide, while B cell can directly bind to bacteria also. So B cell can recognize all different kinds of antigens, the proteins, the lipids, the DNA, anything. And B cell recognizes antigen in a 3D conformational way. While in contrast, if you look at T cells, T cell cannot directly bind to any antigen. T cell can only recognize proteins, and it can only recognize very linear peptides, like 10 to 11 amino acid short peptides. So there is a difference in recognition of antigen by B cell and T cell. So let's see, why is that difference there? The difference is because the B cell receptor, which is recognizing, is actually an immunoglobulin molecule which is present on the cell surface. While for T cell, it is the T cell receptor. If you look at the structure of the T cell receptor, the T cell receptor has two chains, alpha beta, and this is your MHC class 1 molecule with beta 2 microglobulin, and this is your protein, which is a peptide. That is how the T cell recognizes because this groove is very narrow, very narrow. I'll show you the TCR groove also in that cartoon. The TCR can only bind to 8 to 10 amino acids, and same is true for. So how does it say that if you are having a protein peptide is bound to MHC class 2, why it should activate only CD4 cells and why not CD8 cells? Anybody has thought?
Any co-stimulatory molecule?
Co-stimulatory molecule. No, recognition. First, how does it say that I need to only bind to I need to present the antigen only to the T helper cell, that it cannot present to the other cell?
Ma'am, MHC1 and MHC2, the antigen binding groove is little different. Like MHC1
yes,
has
it is different. Yes.
So that helps
is
maybe in MHC restriction.
So the T cell receptor is similar on CD4 and CD8. There is no difference in the CD4, CD8, I mean the T cell receptor. It's not that the CD4 has a different T cell.
It's the signal transduction that has to occur.
Signal transduction comes later. First is the recognition.
In the thymus, while
yes, what's happening in the thymus?
While educating.
No, that is different. We will talk that it is not related to that. It is basically related to fact that the MHC class 2 is recognized by the CD4 molecule. So the CD4 molecule recognizes the MHC class 2 in an area away from where the peptide is bound. So that brings the CD4 cell in close vicinity to the antigen presenting cell which is having MHC class 2. The CD4 cannot bind to MHC class 1, while the CD8 molecule can bind to MHC class 1 but can't bind to MHC class 2. So the CD8 cell comes in close vicinity to the MHC class 1. That is why this system works perfectly, that antigen presentation through MHC class 2 will occur only to CD4 cells, while recognition of cells which are having viruses or tumors or any intracellular pathogen will occur only with the with the cytotoxic T cell. Because this is a virus infected cell or this is a tumorous cell. So we want it to be killed. We don't want that cell to stay. So that will be recognized only by the CD8 cell. So this is what gives them the tight fit. The CD8 recognizing the MHC class 1. May I request you to put off your mics? Please switch off your mics. So if you see here in this cartoon, you can clearly see that CD8 is binding to MHC class 1 and CD4 is binding to MHC class. So that gives us perfect binding. And some of you said that signal transduction, yes, but signal transduction in both of them happen via CD3. The CD3 molecule is present on all T cells. Okay. So this is how the activation will occur. Once the CD4 has recognized this MHC class 2 molecule, these two cells will come in very close vicinity and the MHC TCR complex will come together, the cells will come together and you have these CD3 molecules which have long intracytoplasmic chains. They have these motifs which will cause phosphorylation and further signal transduction. But if you look at it, the initial T cell, the naive T cell, when it binds with MHC TCR, it does not get activated. It needs some more signal. Some more signals. So the signals come from that when this binding happens, the antigen presenting cell, as I told you, the genetic cell maturation, there is expression of co-stimulatory molecules. So these co-stimulatory molecules are CD80, 86 or B7.1 or 2 on the antigen presenting. This will bind to CD28. Once this binding occurs, there is very tight fit and the T cell gets activated, starts proliferating. And once it does that, you get lots of IL-2 and other cytokine signals. So this is the three signals which are required for a good T cell activation. One, the MHC TCR interaction. The second, CD80-86 interaction with CD28 on the T cell. And third are the cytokines. And depending on what cytokine is being produced by the antigen presenting cell, which will also depend on what the microbe is. If it is fungi, it will be different. If it is virus, it will be different. If it is bacteria, it will be different. If it is allergen, it might be different. So that will decide the fate of the T cell. That would it become a Th1, would it become Th2, would it become Th17? So if you look at the T cell response in toto, it is that you first need to recognize the antigen, be it CD8 cell or CD4 cells, then it gets activated. Once it gets activated, it starts producing interleukin-2, and all of you know that interleukin-2 is the most important cytokine for T cell proliferation. And it acts in an autocrine loop and causes clonal expansion. Clonal expansion means the cells which are recognizing that antigen increase in numbers. And once they increase in numbers, some of them becomes effector cells. That is, they will cause activation of macrophages, B cells, other cells to cause an immune response, which will cause somehow get rid of that infection. And some will stay as memory cells in our body so that we know that this encounter has happened. Similarly, the CD8 cell will become activated CD8 cell. They will go and kill the target cells, and some will stay as memory CD8 cells. So this is how a T cell response is generated. And people who are more into biochemistry can know that once you get this, there is phosphorylation of multiple proteins and there is downstream signaling by multiple intermediary molecules, of which calcineurin is most important, and we have drugs which are used as calcineurin inhibitor to prevent T cell activation. So can anybody name one or two calcineurin inhibitors?
Tacrolimus.
Tacrolimus.
Sirolimus is not a calcineurin inhibitor. Where does sirolimus act?
That is tyrosine kinase.